Hello, I'm Ron Miscavige, and this is Life After Scientology. And of course, that song you heard introducing the program is Barnum and Gumbo. Um, so let me get the commercials out of the way to begin with. Okay. Um, First of all, if you want to see uh, all of the talks I've done, interviews I've done, the interview with the police when they picked up the private investigators, go to my website, therealronmiscavige.com. And you got to put in those exact words, therealronmiscavige.com. And I'll tell you why. The church bought up over 500 variations of my name so that no matter what you put in, if it's not exactly what I just said, it's going to take you to their hate site. And if you believe a word of it, I should have been shot last week. But anyway, that's how they operate. They try to character assassinate people, and I don't give a hoot, so they can say what the hell ever they want to say. Okay, and the other thing is this: if you care to help us in this endeavor of exposing the church and its abuses, I invite you to become a patron. As a matter of fact, Rick Shaw, I hope this is the right Rick Shaw, just donated $10 and became a patron. He's an old buddy of mine. He plays with Johnny Mathis and a great guy, a great bass player, and one of the best I've ever played with, as a matter of fact. So thank you very much, Rick. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because of this. Look, it's good to hear this program, and it's good that we have a program where people come on and tell their whole story. It's not truncated, it's not shortened, it's not 8 hours of interview and then 2 minutes on the air. This is a platform where people can tell the story and expose the church. You out there who enjoy this, I'm sure you enjoy it, or otherwise you wouldn't be listening to me talk right now. You can participate and you can do something about this by becoming a Patreon. And if you go to the page, you can, donate $1, $2, $5, $100, whatever you want. It's all appreciated because it goes to help this program stay on the air. As I've said many times, we're doing this on our own dime. We have no sponsor, and your help is very much appreciated. Okay, so now my guest is Karen Schless Pressley. This is an old friend of mine, many years, many, many years. And she consented very graciously to come on and get interviewed. And if you want to hear what she has to say in a book form, she has a book. It's called Escaping Scientology, An Insider's True Story. You can go on to Amazon to buy this book. And I will tell you this, it is worth every penny. It's a different book than mine, which is ruthless, but it's from her viewpoint, and she's a very educated person. And I'll tell you, you'll enjoy the hell out of this book. So, Karen, hello.
Hey, Ron. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really honored.
Well, I'm pleased to have you on. And like all of our guests, what I request that you do to begin with is tell us, how did you get in Scientology? Give us a little insight, skinny there.
Well, back in the late 70s, Peter Schless and I met in Houston, Texas. I was working two jobs at the time, and he was a road musician that happened to play at the same club that I was working at in the evenings. I was a server, and he was a house musician. So we met in Houston, and um, Scientology started to cross our path. Peter went to a concert and met Chick Corea concert, jazz musician, and he went backstage, and Chick Corea extended his hand and said, "Peter, have you ever heard of L. Ron Hubbard? If you have not, this is somebody that you definitely need to get to know." So Chick Corea was actually the first one that introduced us. John Travolta was filming Urban Cowboy when we were living in Houston, and Peter was playing on the soundtrack for the Urban Cowboy movie. And John Travolta was at that time connected to Celebrity Center. He didn't tell us about Scientology, but we heard about his involvement. So we were kind of interested, like, you know, how Scientology might have helped his career. So that was all the beginning. But Peter and I moved to LA in around 1980 to really make it in our careers. And actually, we got into Scientology through the music business. You know, like I said, Chick Corea, also John Travolta. Peter was doing a lot of gigs in LA. His roadie was a Scientologist, so he would tell Peter about Scientology. We met a lot of other celebrity and musicians like everybody from David Pomerantz to David Campbell, who's a arranger. Just met so many people, and they would say, if you want to improve your skills as an artist, get involved in Scientology, find out about it. And that's exactly how we got in, was really through the power of music.
Wow, that's great. And I can see how that happens because let's face it, Peter being a keyboardist, going to hear Chick, who's just his style of music is totally different than anybody's I've ever heard. And
Yeah.
I could see Peter being influenced because Chick, he had that altitude that you're going to listen to what this guy has to say. The same with me. If I were to talk to Doc Severinsen and he told me about something, I'd say, I got to check it out. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's, when we got involved in Scientology, we started out at the Valley Org, which was in Studio City, California, where we lived. We lived up in Coldwater Canyon. Well, we started out in Burbank. But we heard about the Celebrity Center, that's where, if you were in the arts, that's where you needed to be. So, of course, we went to CC, and, CC actually, Celebrity Center lured us pretty much hook, line, and sinker. First of all, when you walk into Celebrity Center and you have any sort of accomplishments as an artist, by that point, Peter already had the hit song On the Wings of Love. He had already written the theme song to Rambo First Blood Part 2. So when you have some accomplishments in your career, they treat you, you get red carpet treatment. And so, all the different ingredients of Celebrity Center acted as a real alluring, it had very much an alluring appeal to us. We were treated as special people. As we learned about Scientology and what it was really doing, you have to understand we had no religion at the time. So it didn't clash with any other beliefs that we had been raised with.
Right.
Peter's dad had been an atheist, and my parents had been Catholic, but I left that when I was a child. So it didn't clash with anything. And, in the 1970s, 1980s, we were a culture that we were looking for utopia. So the goals of Scientology, a world without war, without criminality, without insanity, is like, wow, utopia. But the biggest thing is that as celebrities, we learned that we were people that could change the world, because this is what L. Ron Hubbard's writings told us. And so that was very appealing to us. It gave us a purpose, like bigger than life. And it gave us a purpose that ultimately ended up surpassing our career, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I just wanted to say, I got into Scientology and was in Scientology for 16 years total. And I do want to mention, you mentioned my book. There's a couple of things about my book that I'd like to talk about at this time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, you mentioned it in the beginning. Here's a cover, Escaping Scientology, an Insider's True Story. And I want to tell you a little bit about this cover now that I've told you a little bit about how I got into Scientology, because it's very significant. The cover was designed by Jefferson Hawkins, an old friend of mine from the base. But if you look at the pictures, you see the Celebrity Center in the background that has a very dark and ominous appearance. And then you see the picture of me. And the reason we chose these images for the cover is because I was really at the peak of my design career. I was a fashion designer, and I moved out to LA with Peter so that we could each really make it in our careers.
Yeah.
Okay. And the picture of me that we chose was me in my first modeling session for a line of clothing that I had just designed. And that was one of my dresses that I was modeling for the session. And the significance of that for me was, there I was as an artist with a total desire to develop my career. And like I said, Peter had some great accomplishments already.
Yeah.
And when we got involved in Scientology, we did so because we wanted to really gain help to be better as artists, more creative, better communicators and things like that. But instead, what happened for us at Celebrity Center was not that. It's just that we became better Scientologists, not
Yeah,
necessarily better
I get
artists.
that difference. It's a measurable thing you're talking about now, because
Mhm.
one is not the other, is it?
One is not the other. And my book really does, it's about an inch and a half thick. It tells the story of what it's like to be a creative individual. Peter and I were both artists, me as a designer, he as a musician. So it tells what happens when a creative individual walks into Celebrity Center and they're presented with this game that's bigger than life and the possibility of a utopia. And as you learn about Scientology, the whole book tells the story of coming in, how we were lured, how we were trapped, and then how I finally escaped. So that is the essence of the story of the book.
Yeah.
And if anyone here is listening that has a friend, a loved one, a past spouse or whatever that has been lured into Celebrity Center, you really need to read the story, because there's a specific entrapment that happens to artistic people. And that is the sole purpose of Celebrity Center, is to offer that promise of spiritual freedom, but while actually entrapping the individual.
Okay, but Karen, before we go any further, give us some examples of what you mean by entrapment. How do
Yeah.
they do this? What is their modus operandi?
Well, let me start with, like, as the entry into Scientology, the mindset, okay? As a celebrity of any level, whether you're an up and coming, like Peter and I were, we had some accomplishments. We were certainly not A-lister celebrities, but we had some accomplishments in our career. And then there's different levels of celebrity, right? So depending on what achievement level you were at in your career, uh, affected how you were treated at the Celebrity Center. Okay,
Got it.
so that's part of the trap. For example, when Leah Remini was in the classroom, and she was a celebrity, as an actress, she was not the same level of celebrity as like John Travolta and Tom Cruise. They were given specific private entrances and course rooms and auditing rooms that, for example, Leah was not privy to.
I got it.
And then there are even more entry level people. So it's part of the whole head game that plays on your ego, and you become sort of addicted to this special treatment that you receive at CC, and you crave you crave more, you crave better treatment, you crave reaching higher levels so that you can be taken care of as an even more special person. And so here's what happens at CC. Celebrities are protected. They're understood in ways that they're not understood in other areas of Hollywood. They're gratified because this is a sanctuary for artists. And in the competitive environment, you know what it's like in the music industry.
Yeah.
Musicians are fighting for gigs, you're competing.
Yep.
Actors are trying out for parts, heavy competition. And so Celebrity Center opens its doors like a sanctuary that protects you. So you come there and you get swaddled, you get you get taken care of, you get glorified, and you are revered simply by walking into the building and showing up for course or auditing. So this is all very alluring. Okay, so in my book, I describe several chapters describing what I call celebrity spirituality, because you become drunk with a self-importance that Celebrity Center just bathes you in. Um, Hubbard's writings talk about how, as an artist, you are the elite. Uh, you are the elite of the elite as an artist. That your ability to affect the world through your art is capable of raising the tone level, and therefore that makes you a special being. So your ego is built on this, of like your importance. So you become drunk with this self-importance, and it's really a signature cocktail that CC offers. It's a mix of these ego-boosting words that elevate the artist. You're seen as a special breed of human being. You come to believe that you're the most valuable people in Earth's top strata, and you're the dreamer of dreams. And this is a quote: "Who alone can elevate the tone of society." Right. So here you are, and you're in this luxury CCOH oasis. You're receiving privileged services depending on who you are and what you've accomplished. You're surrounded by beautiful people and famous names. And if you garnish that cocktail with all the attitudes, the values, and beliefs that is embedded in the Scientology belief system, you become intoxicated from this daily engagement in celebrity spirituality.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what else. You become arrogant because it is noticed. It was noticed by me. There's a certain arrogance that comes with that. And that's a hell of a point you're making. I'll tell you, Karen.
Yeah, it's that arrogance. It's really it's like being on an intravenous, an IV. You
Yeah.
have IV where you're constantly fed all of this, and you're fed that arrogance. And it wasn't until I actually got out of the CC environment and ultimately out of Scientology that I was able to look back at my own arrogance and how I used to have this air of myself, of self-importance, and it was all, it was all part of the package at
Yeah.
CC.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that and
Yeah.
and that is how, and by giving you all that treatment, that is how Celebrity Center gains the allegiance of celebrities, because they are treated as special beings at that place, and they would never consider cutting ties because they need it. It's an
Yeah.
addiction.
No, that's a heck of a point. And it, it is noticeable. I saw that when I was in the church, especially when I was on staff, and I would see there was a guy who came to the ship, the Free Winds. All right. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Guitar player?
No, but it
Bass
doesn't
player.
matter. He
Okay.
came to the Free Winds, which is a ship that Scientology has. And Ludwig, who was the port captain then, told me later when this guy got on the ship, he had to spend 45 minutes handling his feelings because he didn't feel he was actually acknowledged to the degree that he should be acknowledged. Do you believe that?
Wow.
And as I say, I'm not going to mention
That's
the
that.
name because the guy doesn't deserve to be thrown under the bus. But you talk about arrogance and conceited.
Mm,
You develop this air of superiority, even if you're
hmm.
not a celebrity. If you're a Scientologist, you feel that you're in the know that mere wogs, people who are not Scientologists don't have. But it's like that arrogance on steroids when you get in the Celebrity Center. I see that, and it's
Yeah.
a very good point you're making, Karen. So continue on. I just wanted to make through sense in there.
Yeah. So my book, I really go to great lengths to explain that whole phenomenon. So in a sense, when you bring new people into Scientology through Celebrity Center, you're basically putting these people into this system that really creates narcissism.
Yeah,
It's like a narcissistic system. I'm
right.
not saying that, everybody at CC is diagnosed with narcissism. That's not the point. It's the arrogance, the self-importance, but let's face it, in my opinion, Scientology is all about self-knowledge, self-power, and self-control. And these are each things that artistic people need, and some even crave and are addicted to, because you and I were talking about, you've been a musician, you're a trumpet player, I've been a designer. And, when you're out there competing in Hollywood, you're putting your stuff out there, your essence, your creativity, your ability to play your horn, or my ability to design. And so this is all about, what do you want most? You want to have self-knowledge. You want to have self-power. You want to have self-control so that you can succeed. And that's exactly what CC feeds. So that is their job. So to me, Celebrity Center was very alluring for all that it offered. And like I said, it was also a trap because you get to the place where you need that. But not only that, Scientology, as you know very well, Scientology basically teaches you that you're very different from people on the outside. And while they're promising you spiritual freedom and all these abilities that no one else can achieve outside of Scientology, what that does, it starts creating, the separatism of the us and them phenomenon. So now you're separate from other people. You're pushing away your old friends. You're pushing away your family. And only the people that are Scientologists are the people that you will hang out with.
That
Uh,
does happen. That's very true.
and so it's obviously it creates a real world problem because Scientologists become so separate and they lose touch with the reality of the real world that everyone else is dealing with.
Yeah.
Okay. So to that sense, Celebrity Center, I talk about in my book that Celebrity Center is an implant station. Just like I believe all Scientology organizations are actually implant stations. They implant different ideas, different phobias in your mind. They implant phobias of like Scientology is the only solution to quote unquote mental wellness. And the phobia becomes against seeking outside help from mental health professionals. So it's an implant of this phobia. There's many phobias that are implanted in Scientology. And so to that extent, I talk about that. But a biggest point that I want to make is that Celebrity Center was where Peter and I were radicalized. And I want to use that term radicalized because that's what happened to Peter and I while we were at Celebrity Center. There we were, really striving to make it in our careers. And instead, we were becoming radicalized by Scientology. We were turned into the foot soldiers for Scientology's cause. And that's what happens to many, many people that go there is their own radicalization.
You mean, before we go any further, are you saying that you now, when you mean radicalize, you're talking about now you're professional recruiters to get other people to join the cause? Is that what you mean by that, Karen?
Well, that's one step of it. The fact that Peter and I, we took on the beliefs of Scientology as our own. And like I said, we had no other religion before that it clashed with. So when you start, if you think of what happens when somebody gets radicalization, and Steve Hassan, who wrote a book called Combating Cult Mind Control and Freedom of Mind, he's written about radicalization through cults. And that what happens is you start replacing your own personal values and your own personal beliefs with the values and the beliefs of the group
I got it.
to where you move out, you get rid of your own independent thinking, your own causative thinking, your own critical thinking, and you take on the perspective, the filters, and the beliefs of Scientology, and that becomes who you are. So as you are radicalized, your personality changes from who the real Peter was or who the real Karen was to who Karen is or who Peter is as a Scientologist. And that personality starts to take over who we really are.
That's a damn good point, Karen. I got to tell you, and I've seen it happen because one of the things the church ran a program one time when they were getting attacked by some group where they said, "Think for yourself." To this group, but truthfully, you don't think for yourself in Scientology. If you have a problem or something you want to get solved, you find out what L. Ron Hubbard says and you adopt that.
Exactly.
And that's not thinking for yourself. That's
No.
other determinism. You're being determined by somebody else as to what you should be and where you should look for answers. And it's not in your own personal observation of life. That's for sure.
It's correct. And that is what is in my book. I talk about um, George Orwell's book, 1984, where he discusses some concepts like doublethink and groupthink. And the radicalization of celebrities and any Scientologist, happens while, you're taking out your old ideas and you're replacing it with the ideas of Scientology, including your own moral compass. Your own moral compass starts to change because now you're doing things for the greatest good of Scientology. You're really not doing it for the greatest good of your own personal dynamics or compartments of your own life. You're really doing it for the greatest good of Scientology. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about radicalization. And
I got it.
you can take that concept to an extreme where, people refer to jihadists as radicalized extremists. But honestly, the fact that Peter and I walked out of our careers and joined the Sea Org, so we utterly abandoned what we were doing and joined the Sea Org. That is exactly what radicalization is. Like, Scientology doesn't have a jihad concept, but similar. When you sign a billion-year contract, you're giving all your future lifetimes to Scientology. If that isn't radicalization, I don't know what is.
I agree. And you made that point. And I want to get into the fact that I hate to say this, but I will admit it. I was kind of part and parcel for you and Peter actually joining the Sea Org. And
Really?
well, you know that, Karen. Maybe you can get into it without throwing me under the bus too hard, but
No, tell
I'll
me.
admit to it, man.
Tell me. I'd love to you say a little more about that.
Well, do you remember I came to CC to talk to Peter about joining the Sea Org? And
I
about,
wrote about that in my book, Ron. I wrote about how you came to,
you can explain that a little bit. And I mean,
yeah,
they got the whole story in your book, but just give them a little taste of that because that's how radicalized I was. I thought I have to get this absolutely great musician. And it was mainly Peter, and not in that you weren't worth it, but I'm saying that was
sure.
my main thing because he was going to be in the band then.
Right. Right. You were, I think at the time, the music director, or at least you were in the Golden Era Musicians,
Yeah.
and Peter was going up to Gold to work on some albums, or I think he did a little bit on the Road to Freedom and stuff like that. But you were coming down to Celebrity Center to kind of like help Peter make the transition
Yep.
because David Miscavige overlooked Peter's disqualification of taking LSD to
Right.
recruit him for the Sea Org. And, for me, I was like, whoa, because Peter was at the peak. I mean, he was winning awards as a songwriter at that point. He just won the BMI award for most played song of 1983 with On the Wings of Love. And he was beginning to meet incredible composers like David Foster and other people. And
Right.
he was developing peers that were of his dreams. These were accomplishments of any songwriter's dreams. And right at this time, David Miscavige was recruiting him for the Sea Org. And, I was like, I actually joined the Sea Org before Peter did. Of course, I started working at Celebrity Center in the Sea Org, and I became the commanding officer of Celebrity Center. But that was after a couple of years of Peter and I recruiting for CC.
Yeah.
And the fact that Peter was saying yes to the Sea Org, I had really mixed feelings about it, even though I was already in the Sea Org.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I had such a fear that he was going to lose who he really was, who I considered him to be a really talented composer and musician. And I had a great fear that he was going to lose this, not develop it, but lose it.
Well, I'll tell you, your fear is warranted because he has lost it. You
He
know that.
totally,
He
he
ended up in the
totally
hole.
has lost it.
Ended up in the hole. Did hate videos on you, on me,
Mhm.
and I pity the guy because he's just like I saw the video he did on me. He's like the North Korean prisoner with guns pointed at his head, saying things that. Listen, I worked
Yes.
with Peter for 20 years, sitting right next to him, composing things and arranging stuff, and I had a great time with him. I really loved him. He was a great individual. He's turned into something that is not Peter Schless. We can agree. So your fear is warranted because it happened. Sorry for the
And
interruption, but I really wanted to give you my 2 cents on that, Karen. Go on.
well, I mean, Ron, we'll talk about this more later, but I want to, since you brought that up, I want to touch on that right now
Okay.
because, you know, you and Peter were so tight. Gosh,
I
for how
know.
many years? 20 years, something like that. And Peter helped you and you helped Peter,
Yeah.
both as individuals, as men, as Sea Org members, and as musicians. I mean, you shared many parts of your life together. And you and Becky and Peter and I lived together. We will talk about that later.
Yeah.
But you saw Peter go through a transition, the very transition that I feared.
Yeah.
And he lost himself. He
Yeah,
lost
he
himself.
was like a brother to me, Karen. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Yeah. And this happens to a lot of creative people who end up getting sucked into the Scientology trap, specifically the Sea Org trap. The Sea Org
Yeah.
trap is even worse. Talk about radicalization. But um, okay, I just wanted to mention that because we're going to talk in a little bit about it's important to talk about how your relationship with Peter and the relationship of the four of us, you, Becky, me, and Peter, how that impacted my life and helped me to cope. But I want to finish up a couple points that we were talking about from
Okay.
Celebrity Center. Um, as Peter and I were becoming radicalized, it became more important to us to recruit other celebrities and other people into Scientology because we felt that it was our duty. Okay, so now instead of just being involved in the arts, this wonderful, you know, sort of utopian goal, we're starting to feel it's our duty. And that reflected the radicalization of our mindset from being just sort of free-spirited people, isn't Scientology fun, blah, 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 to we've got to save the freaking planet, you know, and it's everybody's goal to do this. So, you know, we're talking to everybody we knew. You know, Peter worked with Cher's rock band, and more people that we talked to about Scientology said no than yes. Cher, absolutely not. We talked to Jeffrey Osborne when we were working with On the Wings of Love, not interested. He went on Melissa Manchester's world tour. We talked to all the band musicians and everyone. No, no one was interested. When Melissa was playing in Las Vegas at you know, the big shows like MGM Grand and stuff,
Yeah.
musicians from Las Vegas would hang out backstage, and that's where I met people like, I don't know, Sheena Easton, Randy Jackson. At the time, Randy Jackson was a bass player for Journey. He later, I mean, he's done so many things. He became a judge on American Idol, but I remember talking to Randy Jackson backstage and telling him what Scientology believed. Randy was a Rosicrucianist at the time, and he would question, he'd say, "Oh, KK, do you really believe all that?" And so, you know, my friend Steve Ferris, who played with Mr. Mister, talked to him about it. He said, no. We talked to Frank Stallone. We did get him involved,
Yeah.
but he didn't want anything to do with it. We talked with Garnett Raleigh. She was the wife of bass player Greg Raleigh, who played for Santana. And we did recruit several Santana musicians in, but they didn't like it and they left. So our recruitment was, we made a lot of effort, but we didn't actually get a lot of people to stay in. But at that point, our goal, we knew that Scientology was, you know, at the time, Celebrity Center was very different than it is now. It's like, you know, Scientology was newer, and we were trying to create mouthpieces for Scientology, and that was the whole job of Celebrity Center. You know, they told people that they were trying to help them become better artists, but what they were really trying to do is just to create mouthpieces to popularize Scientology. So
Right.
um, anyway, that's covered a great deal in my book, and I want to point out just a couple of things before we move on, and that is at the time when I was the commanding officer of Celebrity Center, a lot of the people that were at CC were teenagers who have now gone on to become A-listers. Like, for example, Elizabeth Moss. She was a teenager. She was Ron Moss's daughter, who was managing Chick Corea. A lot of the people that are now defending Scientology in the media are actually second generation Scientologists, like Elizabeth Moss.
Yeah.
She had no chance to think for herself ever. She's
No.
only ever been a Scientologist. That's all she knows. Erica Christian.
Listen, I met her when she was a little baby because Ron Moss was a friend of mine, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the
How
point being,
how about Erica Christensen? Is that her name?
Erica Christensen is, I was going to bring her up. She's one of the people now, doing media
Yeah.
interviews, defending Scientology. I don't know that she's second generation.
Oh, absolutely, she is.
Is she second generation?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah.
Giovanni Ribisi, second generation.
Yeah.
Of course, Tom Cruise is not. Tom Cruise and John Travolta and Peter and I and numerous other people, we walked in mid our careers.
Right.
But these second generation Scientologists are now defending Scientology because they have never opened themselves up to the truth outside of Scientology. And I just want to bring up just a couple more things about CC. Celebrity Center was not a healthy environment, and I want to explain what I mean by that. L. Ron Hubbard was the #1 celebrity in Scientology. But when CC was started by Yvonne Gillum, she actually became a major celebrity in her own right because she was such a loving, nurturing leader. And very interesting that she was cultivating a very cultic environment at Celebrity Center. People loved Yvonne, but people thought that Yvonne, because she was so loving, that was the best that Scientology had to offer. So people were thinking about Scientology by thinking of how Yvonne treated people.
Wow.
But that was Yvonne's personal characteristic. That was her personality.
Yeah,
And
she didn't get that. She didn't get that from Scientology.
She did not get it from Scientology. It's who she was. And that was the beautiful thing about it. The problem with it was Yvonne became such a celebrity. You know that she developed a brain tumor,
Yeah.
and you know that she was medically neglected, and she was basically let to die. And that was an operable brain tumor. She could have lived, but what that shows is that was one of the first evidences I ever had of how Scientology medically neglects their staff.
Yep.
She died unnecessarily. And the point of that is that Celebrity Center never really recovered after Yvonne's death. The staff were very glum. The Sea Org took over and commandeered Celebrity Center. So now you have everyone, instead of just loving Scientology and each other, now they're all about making money and getting in big names and the stats, popularizing Scientology. So the whole climate change. So my book talks about that story. It was a significant thing in the way that it affected a lot of people. But a point that I want to get onto is that the Celebrity Center and Scientology of that time is very different from what it is now. We were talking about how celebrities, for example, Elizabeth Moss and Erica Christensen and Giovanni Ribisi, they're just three names that I'm mentioning of heads in the sand, living in the bubble, drinking the Kool-Aid individuals. That's why I really respect people like Paul Haggis and Leah Remini, who were both celebrities. Now, Leah was a second generation Scientologist. Paul Haggis was not. But both of them had a strong enough conscience and moral compass to see past the bullshit that celebrities were entrapped in, and they started to question it because they had a personal moral compass. Paul Haggis had his own issues with his daughter that helped to heighten his conscience about Scientology. And Leah had her issues with Tom Cruise and the whole fiasco at the wedding and asking about Shelley. The point being, they had reserved enough of their own personal integrity and personality that they could rise above the crap.
Yep.
And see through it and leave and speak out. And I want to bring up Paul Haggis here as somebody that I deeply respect, because he was one of the earliest ones to actually, he wrote a letter to all of his celebrity friends and told them about how Scientology was lying, what a fraud it was, and how they were abusing people. And he informed his celebrity friends, and they chose to turn a blind eye. So I love the fact that, and Jason Begay also joins that group of speaking out and exposing the truth. So what makes people different? People like Leah, Paul Haggis, Jason Begay, I think they reserved enough of their personal integrity. They had enough of their own independent thinking, a moral compass, a conscience that was not sucked up by Scientology.
I agree. And I'll tell you, I hate to say this, but we're running up against a little time constraint here. And I really wanted to get into when you left Scientology. I mean, you blew, as they say. There was 2 times, which is a hell of a story. But Karen, I got to tell you, we have to pull the plug on this right now. And would you please come back and just finish this up with us sometime? I'd appreciate it very much.
Ron, that would be great. Yeah, it was a great conversation. Thank you so much. So yes, I'd love to come back.
Okay. So listen, yeah, and I will get you back as soon as I can. Look,
Okay.
let me do a little commercial before we end this program. Share this with friends, please, and let's get into different groups so that more people can hear these people come on this program where they can tell the whole story. They're not going to get interviewed for 18 hours and then they have about 35 seconds on the screen. That's what Life After Scientology is all about. And all of you who would like to do something about this, you can just become a Patreon. And you're doing something about it. You'll feel better, I guarantee you. Because it's one thing to observe and listen to these, which, look, no matter what, I'm going to keep on going on this. But it's another thing to say, hey, I helped out. You're going to feel better. Meanwhile, until the next time, I am Ron Miscavige. This is Life After Scientology. See you on the next episode.